Python is the most popular programming language now, and it is required in almost all national and international competitions. So I decided to learn it. But first things first, I wanted to thank you for the positive reception of my last video about making a game in Unreal Engine in 7 days. And if you don't know what am I talking about, link is in the description below. So let's get back to the topic. As I said, I wanted to learn Python because almost all competitions required it. But that wasn't the only reason. I knew that this language is very trending and I wanted to see why. I read the Python tutorial and made a simple game using Pygame. The results are at the end of this video, so remember to watch carefully. And by the way, Pygame is a free library used for creating games in Python. My opinion might be controversial, but I didn't quite like this language, and here are some reasons. So the first one is readability, because the Python uses indentation to determine where, for example, the if scope is and where it ends, and I couldn't work with this on a daily basis. And Python don't use any brackets to emphasize where a given function starts and ends, like for example in C++ or other programming languages. Python is also a high-level language, and that's a big disadvantage, because I like to have control over almost everything, even if this means that I have to spend more time on my code to get it working. And lastly, Python uses interpreter, which means that in larger projects it is much slower than a well-written C++ code. Of course, there are some advantages. I would say it's decent for the beginners, and it doesn't require that much knowledge of the computer itself. And Python has also a huge community, which makes it easy for a newcomers to start, because they can ask anyone on some forums or on a Reddit, and you will faster write the code, because you don't have to worry about any brackets. It was a long intro, but it's over now and we will get to the main part, so enjoy! I started with installing Python using winget, because I work on Windows. I typed the winget command in Windows terminal, I checked the version of the installed Python, and I opened documentation on their website. I started with their tutorial, and because I knew C++, it was very easy for me to learn Python. The first 2 pages were about Python itself, and the third page was about using Python interpreter and the interactive mode that the Python offers. So nothing really important here, because I use IDE to manage my files. The next chapter was kind of like an introduction. It was some kind of showcase what Python offers, what the data types are in Python and what features it has. And at the end of this page there was a subchapter called First Step Towards Programming, which showcased a basic sample code. The fourth chapter proved to be the most interesting, even though it was also the longest one. Despite reading it from the beginning, I didn't really found anything cool or exciting, because I already knew the stuff from the C++. Only the keyword arguments were the sole exception, as they seem extremely useful when you can recall the argument's name but not their order. The next chapter was about data structures. It included lists, tuples, sets, and dictionaries. And there were some subchapters about looping through them and comparing those types. It was a really boring chapter, however I had to read it. Then there was next 4 chapters that were about nothing. Some of those were about errors, another ones about standard libraries or something like this. I just wanted to learn the syntax, maybe something more, but I don't want to get more advanced. The other 7 chapters were about some libraries, limitation, etc. Nothing really interesting if you want to learn the language as a beginner. To summarize, it was a boring few hours, maybe because I knew some other languages and I really found it boring to read the same pages again and again, but maybe just because the tutorial was written bad. So let me know in the comments if you like the Python tutorial and if you even read it. And now it was time to create a simple game in this language, and for this task I chose to create a Flappy Bird, but without a bird and with some squares. Wow! Flappy Bird! It is fucking late, my eyes are closing. What's going on, bro? So first, I had to learn some basics of the module named Pygame, and I went to their website and I went alongside with the tutorial that was on the front page. I did some basic coding and it looked something like this. It was my first code written in Python, except printing hello world in console. And then I didn't know where to start, so I asked Google Gemini to create a snake game using Pygame. And it did a really great job, and I learned from this a lot. And finally it was time to create a flappybird.py file. After that I started doing my thing. I began with defining some color variables and screen size variables. Then I set up Pygame. I took it from my first thing that I did with this. I created a function responsible for drawing a bird, but not exactly from scratch. I used Pygame function to draw a rectangle. The next step was to create a game loop where everything will be drawn to the scene. I checked if the player isn't alive or if the player presses the escape button, and if one of those was true, the game ended. Then I calculated delta time so the players are on different machines have the same results, because delta time is a time between the last frame and the current frame, so it can calculate physics based on this. So to make the game in the same speed on every machine, we have to calculate delta time and multiply it with some variables that we use. I had some thinking while doing the next step, but I came up with some idea that I will use a quadratic equation to calculate how the player falls, so he accelerates when the player doesn't press the space button, and he goes up also using quadratic equation when the player hits space. And there was time for the hardest part, barriers. Because I had to create them, I had to move them every single frame, and if the player collide with them, I had to end the game. But I managed to do that. I made the function named create barriers and I get the random int, so it indicates where the gap is, so the player can fly through it. And I return the position of the barriers from this function, so it can be used after calling to it. I stored the last time where the barrier was spawned and the current time, and if the difference between the current time and the time where the last barrier was spawned was greater or equal to 1500 milliseconds, the next barrier could spawn. And they were moving at constant speed every tick. And the last part was to make a player unalive when he hits the barrier. So I made function that was checking the collision between player and the barrier using collide rect from the Pygame library. So that was it. Just a simple game using Pygame. I don't know in how many games I did it, because I don't really have much time in a day to learn or to make new things. And that's why I'm not counting days, because like I can use 3 or 4 hours a day. So it's not a day, it's 3 hours. So yeah, that was it. Just a simple game in Python. No sounds, no visual effects, but a game is a game, right? Right? And guys, that was the most boring week that I spent in my life. But I hope that was worth it and it will be helpful in my future competitions. Thank you guys for watching. Leave a comment Flappy Bird if you watched till the end. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. See you in the next one.